No, it's.
Yes, we're gonna do the plea.
Yeah, right now you don't, you're not telling.
Are we ready on Abby? Oh, they're going to get Abby? Okay. She's not out here yet, Brenna. Okay. Only her. So we're gonna do the plea on your client,
Yes, sir.
and then we'll start back up with the jury trial. I think that's the only person who's remaining on the docket. Is there one more? Okay. McCormick, have they finished with the paperwork on that? McCormick, is the paperwork finished?
Yes, Your Honor, it is, but however, we're.
All right, so we're gonna take up these two cases, and then we're gonna start back with the jury trial. And I'm being told, state that there needs to be an AKA with regards to McCormick because her last name is not spelled correctly. And we can place that on the record. And defense as possible. Do you have witnesses here today as well?
We don't, Judge, we were, Friday, but we don't have anyone here today, Judge.
Okay. And to the interpreter, if you want to, because we do have witnesses, if you want to sit a chair here, you can, or if you want to sit next to Mr. PARADA, you can. Whatever is easy.
And I heard correctly that you're gonna take two pleas before the jury trial?
Yes,
Okay, can I sit here and then I can move to there?
yes.
Thank you.
You want to be close to the witness?
Yes, well, I'm gonna place my microphones next to them, so I could be there and then.
Or who's her attorney? Abby Moreno? Oh, you're the, okay. Court is going to call 2022 CR, if you could slide down, just CR 6317B, State of Texas versus Abby Moreno. Can I have parties announced for the record for the state? For the defense? And are you Miss Moreno? Counsel, I'm showing you the discovery acknowledgement. Have you received all the discovery in this case, and did you review it with your client?
Yes, I have, Your Honor.
Court will find that the state is in compliance with discovery. Ms. Moreno, I'm showing you what's entitled application for deferred adjudication or community supervision. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it? And did you sign it? I'm gonna need you to speak up, okay? I'm showing you what's entitled true bill of indictment. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Counsel, do you waive the reading of the indictment?
Yes, we do, Your Honor.
State, are you proceeding on the indictment as presented?
We are, Your Honor.
Ms. Moreno, I'm showing you what's entitled court admonishments. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in all the appropriate places? Did you understand you're charged with possession of a controlled substance, penalty group 1 less than 1 gram? That's a state jail felony. The range of punishment is anywhere from 180 days up to 2 years in the state jail facility and up to a $10,000 fine. Did you understand? Did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call, and the right to remain silent? Did you understand by entering this plea bargain agreement, you were giving up those rights? Okay, I'm gonna need you to speak up. And did you intend to give up those rights and enter into a plea bargain agreement in this case? Did you understand if the court were to grant your application for deferred adjudication, if for any reason your deferred adjudication were revoked, the court could find you guilty, not grant you community supervision, and sentence you up to 2 years in the state jail facility and up to a $10,000 fine? Did you understand? Counsel, has your client been able to provide you with any defenses?
She has one.
Do you believe she has a rational as well as a factual understanding of the charges against her?
She's not, she does.
Do you believe she's currently competent and was legally sane at the time of the offense?
Yes, she is.
Ms. Moreno, has anyone threatened you, coerced you, or placed you in fear to get you to enter this plea? Has anyone promised you anything other than the plea bargain agreement? Are you satisfied with the way you've been represented? Are you a U.S. citizen? Court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived her right to jury trial. Showing you the plea bargain page. Did you review that page with your attorney? Did you understand it? According to the plea bargain agreement, there's a $1,200 fine to be probated. State recommends deferred adjudication. This is run concurrent with County Court Cause number 684-769. There's $57 restitution to the Bexar County Crime Lab for drug testing. Did you understand that to be the plea bargain agreement? Defense, is that the plea bargain agreement?
Yes, it is not.
State, is that the plea bargain agreement?
It is, Your Honor.
Next, I'm showing you the paragraph entitled Waiver of Appeal. Did you review that paragraph with your attorney? Did you understand it? And did you sign it in both places? Did you understand by signing that you're waiving your right to appeal? The only items that can be appealed are written pretrial motions that have been filed, heard, and ruled upon by the court. Did you understand? Counsel, have there been any such motions?
No, there has not, Your Honor.
Showing you outside the agreement, the state is recommending that your deferred adjudication be for a term of 1 year and there be 120 hours community service restitution. Did you understand those are recommendations from the state and the court does not have to follow those recommendations? Then to the offense is charged in the indictment. How do you plead? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest? State, any evidence?
Yes, Your Honor, the state would need to admit more to state exhibit 1.
No objection, Your Honor.
Ms. Moreno, I'm showing you what's entitled Waiving Consent to Stipulation of Testimony and Stipulations. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in all the appropriate places? Again, did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call and the right to remain silent? Did you understand? Did you understand that today the state will be presenting evidence in the form of witnesses' statements and police reports, but most importantly, there will be no live testimony? Did you understand? Court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived and consented to stipulation of testimony and stipulations. Court will accept into evidence states exhibits 1 and attachments and review the same. After reviewing states exhibits 1 and attachments, the court will find there is sufficient evidence to find you guilty. Court will defer finding you guilty as you've applied for deferred adjudication. Counsel, are we proceeding with sentencing?
Yes, Your Honor. We're waiting for preparation on this fact.
Anything you wish to say on behalf of your client?
No, we are one of the court to accept the agreement that we have with the state. And we'll be taking care of the misdemeanor court. We're going to be clean on the misdemeanor case. For the if she's started probation, we're asking for that this probation to be confirmed with the misdemeanor case.
What misdemeanor probation?
It's on a theft case, Your Honor. It should be one of the cases that's concurrent for the entire time.
Okay, so it's concurrent with 684-769, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. That's it.
All right. So, Ms. Moreno, how old are you? Do you have children? What are their ages? 17, 7, 6, 6, 5, 4, 2. Is Child Protective Services involved? I'm sorry? All right, so your rights were terminated? All right. Well, what about which 4? Well, what about the 2-year-old? Okay. All right. Are you employed? When's the last time you had a job? Okay. How far did you go in school? Why did you drop out? All right. So is there any gang affiliation with you? All right. What's your drug of choice? No, it's more than alcohol because we're not here for possession of alcohol. So you were in the vehicle with somebody and there was cocaine, meth, brown heroin, drug paraphernalia. So nobody's hanging around with people just doing alcohol. Have you ever done heroin? Have you ever done cocaine? Marijuana? Prescription medication? All right, any other type of drug that you've done other than those? Have you done ecstasy? All right, so are these the only drugs that you've ever done? All right, and who is Reynaldo Esquivel to you? All right, he's going to remain your ex. Okay. All right. Probation.
Yes, Your Honor.
I know that felony drug court is filling up quickly, but please tell them that she desperately needs help. All right, I'm going to sentence you to 2 years. Well, no, I'm going to sentence you to 3 years deferred adjudication. Of course, if she completes everything early, she can get off early, but she needs to go to somebody's drug court, and that's going to be felony drug court because she has an issue. And the fact that you have children who are ages 17, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, and you're not raising any of them tells me Child Protective Services was involved and you didn't do your parenting classes or you couldn't stay off drugs. So we're going to help you with that. Okay. So it's going to be 3 years deferred adjudication, a referral to felony drug court. She's to remain in custody until accepted. And if for some reason felony drug court doesn't accept her, I'm going to want a TAP evaluation while in custody. And before she's released, I want to have another hearing if felony drug court doesn't accept her. Felony drug court, because we're late in the week, they'll probably end up seeing you Monday or Tuesday of next week. Okay. I'm going to want proof of employment within 30 days of release. There's to be no employment as a home health care provider or with minors. There's to be no unsupervised contact with minors. There's to be regular reporting by Zoom or in person. The UA hotline until further notice. And I'm going to want field visits, probation. I'm sorry, it's going to have to be 3 times per month because I don't know if the grandparents got with her and decided we're going to take the children, but technically and for all intents and purposes, they'll be with you. So we're going to do field visits 3 times per month until further notice. Probation, is there anything else she needs?
Did you say anything about community service hours?
We're going to do 200 hours of community service restitution. 40 of those hours will be waived if you provide the proof of the COVID vaccination. Court is not requiring you to do that, but if you do, 40 of those hours will be waived. And I'm going to want parenting classes. And once those parenting classes are completed, the remaining community service hours will be waived. And there's $57 restitution to Bear County Lab. And this run concurrent with 684,769. Probation, is there anything else? Ms. Moreno, is there anything else you need from the court? All right, I'm going to show you what's entitled Trial Court Certification of Defendant's Rights to Appeal. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it? And did you sign it? Because this is a plea bargaining agreement, because I followed your plea bargaining agreement, and because you waive your right to appeal, you do not have the court's permission to appeal. Do you understand? All right, we can go off the record. Here's the thing, Ms. Moreno. You can't continue to have children and not take care of them. And children deserve to be in a home where their parents are clean and sober. So your children are still very young. I know your rights have been terminated, but you still could probably end up being a part of their life if you're clean and sober. But if you have no intention of being clean and sober, don't bring that nonsense to their grandparents' doorstep. You just keep on moving with your life and send money back home. You understand? All right, good luck to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, the court is calling 2021 CR 9419, State of Texas versus Joe McCormick. Can our parties approach and announce for the record for the state?
Catherine Pollard for the state.
For the defense?
Jose Rocha for Joe McCormick.
And are you Miss McCormick? Are you Miss McCormick?
Yes.
All right. My understanding from the defense is her last name is spelled incorrectly. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right. And so for the record, what is the correct spelling of her last name?
MCCOR.
All right, counsel, I'm showing you the discovery acknowledgement. Have you received all the discovery in this case, and did you review it with your client?
Yes, I did, Your Honor.
Court will find that the state is in compliance with discovery. Ms. McCormick, I'm showing you what's entitled Application for Deferred Adjudication or Community Supervision. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it? And did you sign it? Next, I'm showing you what's entitled True Bill of Indictment. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it? Counsel, do you waive the reading of the indictment?
Yes, Your Honor.
State, are you proceeding on the indictment as presented?
Yes, Judge.
Ms. McCormick, I'm showing you what's entitled Court Admonishments. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in all the appropriate places?
Yes.
Did you understand you're charged with injury to a child, bodily injury, reckless as a state jail felony? The range of punishment is anywhere from 180 days in the state jail facility and up to 2 years in the state jail facility and $10,000 fine. Did you understand?
Yes.
If you have a plea bargain agreement with the state, the court does not have to follow your plea bargain agreement. If for any reason the court does not follow your plea bargain agreement and gives you more than you bargained for, the fact that you entered a plea will not be used against you and you will be allowed to withdraw your plea. Did you understand? Did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call and the right to remain silent? Did you understand that by entering this plea, you were giving up those rights? And did you intend to give up those rights and enter into a plea bargain agreement in this case? Did you understand if the court were to grant this application for deferred adjudication, if for any reason your deferred adjudication were revoked, the court could find you guilty and sentence you up to 2 years in the state jail facility and up to a $10,000 fine? Did you understand? Counsel, has your client been able to provide you with any defenses?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you believe she has a rational as well as a factual understanding of the charges against her? Do
Yes, Your Honor.
you believe she's currently competent and was legally sane at the time of the offense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. McCormick, has anyone threatened you, coerced you, or placed you in fear to get you to enter this plea? Has anyone promised you anything other than the plea?
No.
Are you satisfied with the way you've been represented?
Yes.
Are you a U.S. citizen?
Excuse me?
Are you a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
All right, the court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived her right to jury trial. Showing you the plea bargain page. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it?
Yes, Your Honor.
According to the plea bargain agreement, there's $1,500 fine probated. State recommends deferred adjudication. Did you understand that to be the plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense is at the plea.
Yes, Your Honor, it is.
State is at the plea.
Yes, Judge.
Next, I'm showing you the paragraph entitled Waiver of Appeal paragraph. Did you review that paragraph with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in both places? Did you understand by signing that you're waiving your right to appeal? The only items that can be appealed are written pretrial motions that have been filed, heard, and ruled upon by the court. Did you understand? Counsel, are there any such motions?
No, Your Honor.
Next, I'm showing you outside the plea bargain agreement. State is requesting that your deferred adjudication be for a term of 2 years. There'll be 40 hours of community service restitution, no contact with Nicholas Perez Fernandez and his family, and the hostility and aggression control course. Did you understand those are recommendations from the state and the court does not have to follow those recommendations? Then to the offense as charged, how do you plead? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest? State any evidence.
Yes, Judge. The state would offer what's been requested.
No objections.
Ms. McCormick, I'm showing you what's entitled Waiving Consent to Stipulation of Testimony and Stipulations. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in all the appropriate places?
Yes.
Again, did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call in the right to remain silent? Did you understand that today the state will be presenting evidence in the form of witnesses' statements and police reports, but most importantly, there will be no live testimony? Did you understand?
Yes.
Court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived and consented to stipulation of testimony and stipulations. Court will accept into evidence states exhibits 1 and attachments and review the same. All right, after reviewing states exhibits 1 and attachments, the court will find there's sufficient evidence to find you guilty. The court will defer finding of guilt as you apply for deferred adjudication. Are we proceeding with sentencing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Anything you wish to say on behalf of your client?
Yes, Your Honor. Joy has gone through a very difficult situation. She understands this accusation for doing all the work. What the verification would be with doing trial with women. And she believes that the best interest to ask for this.
All right, you do realize that I'm not going to allow you to take care of children.
Yeah.
All right, so 2-year-olds are easily injured. You can't do that. All right, this is what the court is going to do. The court is going to sentence you to 2 years deferred adjudication, a $1,500 fine probated, $80 hours of community service restitution. 40 of those hours will be waived if you provide the COVID vaccination. The court is not requiring you get the COVID vaccination, but if you do, 40 of those hours will be waived. There's to be no contact with the complainant or the complainant's family. Are you employed?
Not this time. I was fired from this rest.
Okay. There's to be the hostility and aggression control course. Do you have any grandchildren?
No.
All right. Proof of employment. Within, I know you're unemployed, but you need to get employment. Yeah. Proof of employment within 30 days. There's to be no employment as a home health care provider or with minors. There's to be no unsupervised contact with minors. I'm going to want random field visits 1 time per month. There's to be regular UAs and regular reporting. All right, probation, is there anything else that she needs? All right, is there anything else you need from the court in order to be successful?
I'm concerned about where I can find employment now. You don't know what the probation officer be able to.
Yes, they will. All right, I'm going to show you what's entitled Trial Court Certification of Defendant's Rights to Appeal. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it and did you sign it?
Yes, sir.
Because this is a plea bargain agreement, because I followed your plea bargain agreement, and because you waive your right to appeal, you do not have the court's permission to appeal. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
All right, so here's the thing. I told you you're not to have any unsupervised contact with children. Some people will look at you and say, oh, she has a grandmotherly face. This would be a great place for her to babysit. You're not allowed to have children in your home babysitting. And if somebody comes over to your house with a child and they say, well, I need to go to the grocery store for a few minutes, why don't you watch? You need to tell them you cannot. All right. All right. Good luck to you. Thank you. Yes. Have a good one. All right. Are we on Mr. PARADA? Who is the witness that needed an attorney?
It'll be our last witness.
Okay, it'll be your last witness. Okay. Okay. And to the interpreter, if you would like to get situated wherever you need to be situated. Oh, no problem. You're good. Do you need more tape? All right. Court is going to call. I'm sorry. Do you need to do some, Brenda?
No.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right. Court is calling 2021 CR 7575, State of Texas versus Jose Parada. Can I have parties announced for the record for the state,
Marcus Sanders and Ryan Groomer.
for the defense?
Guillermo Lara and Mr. Allen, Your Honor.
All right. And I'll note for the record that Mr. Parada is here. Yes.
We're having call with the equipment. He's not
Okay.
hearing.
Yes. Okay, Brenda, those are the whispers we used on our tour. It brings back memories of Florence.
Thank you.
All right. So we're back on the record. And Mr. PARADA is present and we have an interpreter. Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear and affirm you will faithfully translate from English into Spanish and Spanish into English, so help you God?
I do, Your Honor.
All right, you can lower your hand. Could you state your name for the record?
Cesar Chavez, license number 2203.
All right, and are both parties ready for trial? State,
State's ready.
defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so Deputy Laura is going to line the jurors up, then we'll take our first witness. All right, and then do you want to remain sitting there?
Can we move
Yeah.
you?
So he's gonna be the witness?
No, he's,
Okay.
He's the defendant.
yes, and they're not calling the witness yet.
Okay, yeah, and I'll stay here.
Okay, but it's blocking.
Kind of distracting for me too.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
for you. Okay.
Your Honor, as soon as I'm done, you can fix it.
All right, so okay.
But am I not?
You are, but you're not in my eyesight, so I can't.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Those are his.
That's my equipment.
You want to put them underneath that desk because we have the systems in. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, we're ready. Yes.
Okay. All right, for the jury.
Sorry?
Yes, that's coming from somewhere out that door. Yes, I do hear the buzzing.
Mine losing.
No, you're not losing. Can you check outside and see? No, can you see where it's buzzing back there? And Brenda, because I wear glasses, my sense of hearing is off. Like, is it coming from there or here? I think it's coming from back here. All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all for coming in at 1:30. The plan was to have you all here in the morning, but as I told you, I have dockets that run in the morning, and I could see that that one was going to go longer than we anticipated from yesterday. So I hope you all had a decent breakfast and found a great place to park. All right, State, call your next witness.
The state called Jonathan Dominguez.
Deputy Laura. Deputy Laura. All right, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, you can lower your hand, and if you could state your name for the record, please.
Jonathan Dominguez.
All right, state.
Thank you, Judge. Officer Dominguez, can you tell the jury, how are you currently employed?
I'm a patrol officer in the San Antonio Police Department.
How long have you been with SAP?
I've been with the department for 2 years now.
And to become an officer with SAPD, did you have to undergo training?
Yes, 8 months in the academy.
Can you tell the jury what were some of those topics that you were trained on?
It's classroom, so penal code, code of criminal procedure, as well as physical, firearms training, driving training, and hand-to-hand combat, stuff like that.
And what substation are you assigned to?
The West Patrol Substation.
Back in September of 2020, where would you have been assigned to?
I was assigned to the West Substation as well,
Do you remember how long you had been an officer at that point?
just a month.
As an officer on the West Patrol substation, what are some of your duties?
Responding from call to call, based on the district that you're assigned to.
Were you dispatched out to a call on September 21st of 2020, the shooting of Valero?
The shooting of Valero, yes,
Did you make that location?
I did.
Do you remember who you were with that day?
I was with a field training officer, and his name is Daniel Gomez.
Why were you with a field training officer?
Because it was my first month out, so I'm a probationary officer. In the first 3 months of your probation, you're assigned with another more senior officer
What's the purpose of having that senior officer there?
to teach you like what to do in certain scenes and just gain that experience before you are actually left on your own.
When you responded to that location, I guess, were there any other officers already there?
Yes, there was other officers already on scene.
What was your first observation when you made it there?
When I got there, I noticed there was a male standing close to the pumps, laying down, and another officer performing CPR on him. And there was just the male looked very pale, and there was like a pool of blood close to his like head up top.
Were there any vehicles that caught your attention?
I think there was one that was crashed into like some pumps, or I honestly can't recall, but there was one just on scene, but I kind of just brushed past that because there was somebody on the ground and an officer doing CPR.
And so when you're responding to a shooting in progress, I guess, what is your first priority when you get there?
First priority is stop the killing, and then it's stop the dying.
And so as far as stop the killing goes, was there already a suspect in custody?
As getting there, I wasn't the first on scene. I believe he was already in custody. Everybody that needed to be in custody was in custody. People were in cars, and I just got there like after the fact.
Okay. And you stated that there was someone on the ground that was bleeding,
Yes.
and could you tell where he was bleeding from?
I think as soon as I got there, no, but there was a lot of blood in his like head area.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibits 11 and 12. Can you tell me if you recognize those?
Yes.
Are they photos of the individual that you saw on the ground?
Correct.
And do they fairly and accurately depict the individual as you saw him on that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we'll offer state's exhibits 11 and 12. No objections, Your Honor.
All right, states exhibit 11 and 12 are admitted.
May I publish? Yeah.
Yes.
And so is this the individual that you saw on the ground that day?
Correct.
And is this the bullet hole that you saw that day? Objection,
that-
Your Honor, leading.
Sustained.
Did you see a bullet hole that day?
Yes, that's what it looks like.
And so after you, I guess, made sure that the scene was secure, what were your next steps?
Just to gather whatever info I can to see what actually happened from anybody still on scene.
Did you speak to any witnesses at the scene?
I believe I spoke to 2 witnesses.
Do you remember the names of those 2 witnesses?
I do not recall their names right now.
Would you have made a report from that day?
Yes,
Your Honor, may I approach again?
Yes.
Showing you what's been marked as state's exhibit. Can you tell me if you recognize this?
yes,
Is that a copy of your report from that day?
correct.
Feel free to take a moment to look at it to refresh your memory. Just don't read directly from it. And then once you do, if you can tell the jury, what were the names of the 2 witnesses that you spoke to?
Johnny Solis and Christopher Reed.
Do you remember if those 2 witnesses were cooperative with you?
Johnny Solis was, Christopher Reed was as well, but when I asked him to get into a car, said that he didn't want to because his excuse was that he was a big guy, and that's what I can recall.
Do you know if he ever gave any statement to any other officers?
I don't recall.
Do you know if he ever went down to the substation?
I don't believe he did go to headquarters to make a statement.
But you said Johnny Solis was cooperative.
I believe so, yes.
And so you spoke to those 2 witnesses. What else did you do at the scene that day?
After some time, I think I also received stories from officers from like other people that were there on scene. And then I also after that, I took custody of the suspect and took him downtown to give his statement to the homicide detectives.
Why were the other officers, I guess, giving you the information?
Because they had already spoken to the other parties involved.
Were you assigned the reporting responsibility?
I was.
At some point, did you identify the shooter?
Yes, when I took custody of him,
What was the name of the shooter?
Jose Parada.
Do you see that individual here in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Can you point to him and identify an article of clothing that he's wearing?
He's sitting right over there. He's wearing a gray short sleeve button up and blue jeans.
Let the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant. At some point, did you identify the victim in the case?
I believe other officers did, and then just relayed that information to me.
What was the name of the victim in the case?
I don't recall, so I'm gonna look. It's Michael Cepeda.
And so you said you took the defendant to the substation?
To headquarters.
After taking the defendant to headquarters, did you have any other active involvement in the case?
After that, no. I just took him down and he gave a statement and that's it.
We'll pass the witness, Judge.
Defense and defense, I'm sorry, could you lower that? Because sometimes the light hits in the wrong place.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Officer Dominguez. My name is Guillermo Lara. I have a few questions for you. First of all, I want to start off with it. When you were called to the scene in September of 2021, you testified that was that one of the first times that you were called to a scene of an event like this?
I don't know if it was one of the first, but it was one of the few major scenes.
And I believe your testimony was that as part of your training and your experience in terms of getting to where you are now as a I guess a full-fledged SAPD officer, you have to receive training in the penal code as well as training in the code of criminal procedure. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
And as part of your training and as part of your familiarity with the penal code and code of criminal procedure, are you familiar are you familiar that an individual or citizens are allowed to make what's called a citizen's arrest? Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Did you receive any training in that?
Yeah, back then in the academy, yeah.
Okay, so would you agree with me that a citizen not only is entitled to, it's legal for a citizen to either effectuate an arrest or a detention? Would you agree with me?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for a legal conclusion.
That'll be overruled.
You can answer that, Mr. Dominguez.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. With your training experience and familiarity with the penal code you would agree with me that under a citizen's arrest, an individual is entitled to detain or arrest an individual.
Your Honor, I'm
If-
gonna also object to a misstatement of the law, and if we need to further argue, I would ask
Alright.
that we approach.
That'll be sustained with regards to misstatement of the law.
Mr. Dominguez, you testified that you are familiar with what a citizen's arrest is, correct?
I've heard of that term, yes.
Through your training and experience, is that something that you were trained on in the academy?
Yes.
So again, based on your training and experience, you know what it is, correct?
Yeah, I've heard of that statement. That
Would you provide me your interpretation of what a citizen's arrest is, Mr. Dominguez?
what I can recall is just they can, like, a citizen can prevent the consequences of theft. That's what I recall right now.
And under the code provision under 1401, Code of Criminal Procedure, an offense within view, does that sound familiar at all?
Yes.
A peace officer or any other person may, with or without a warrant, arrest an offender when the offense is committed in his or her presence.
Yes.
Specifically, an individual, based on what the law says, the Code of Criminal Procedure, not myself, based on what the law says, an individual is entitled to detain someone, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, misstatement of the law.
Sustained.
What is an individual entitled to do, Mr. Dominguez, based on your training and experience?
Well, also based on what you read, you said it was a peace officer, right? Peace officer, if an offense is committed within my view or presence.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness?
Yes, granted.
Mr. Dominguez, I'm handing you what's been marked as defendant's exhibit number 1. Just take a look at that for me, please. It's the first.
First paragraph.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
After reading and reading what's there under the first paragraph, Mr. Dominguez, would you agree with me that any person?
Yeah, it says any person for can without a warrant arrest an offender for an offense committed in his present class as a felony
And what else?
in a public place.
Now, Mr. Dominguez, as part of your training, with your training and your experience, as far as, did you have any cases dealing with theft cases prior to September 21st, 2021?
I'm sure I had like burglaries or burglary of vehicles and stuff like that.
And how likely is it for an individual to actually recover items, for example, a vehicle, if it's taken from them?
Your Honor, I'm gonna object to relevance.
What is the relevance?
Well, Your Honor, he testified that's specifically what he was experienced in his training and experience.
But what is the relevance to this case?
Your Honor, it goes to, again, the specific item in question here, which is the vehicle, which was a felony offense.
All right, I'm gonna sustain the state's objection.
Mr. Dominguez, as far as your training experience is concerned, that day in September of 2021, you indicated you were working at the West Substation, correct?
Correct.
What part of town does that cover?
It covers up to like 151 SeaWorld area, Alamo Ranch, all the way to General McMullen and Castroville, like that area.
And so you're familiar with that geographic area?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Dominguez, based on your testimony here today, you indicated that it was one of the more, I guess, the more serious offenses that you had been called to at that point, correct?
Correct.
At any point in your training or in the past 2 years as an officer, have you been responsible for making traffic stops?
Yes.
At any time, have you as an officer had to display or point your firearm at an individual?
Unholster my weapon multiple times. Yes.
And is that something that, again, is common practice in in your training, in your field?
It depends on the situation. I wouldn't say it's common practice, but it depends on the situation.
Okay. At times, have you, when you're making these patrol or these traffic stops, have you asked individuals to comply with your orders and remove themselves from the vehicle?
Yes.
And do individuals always comply?
From what I've been through, yes, they've complied.
Now, as far as the specific case, I know you identified that you arrived at the scene and you did identify two particular witnesses. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You indicated that you spoke with Mr. Solis as one of the witnesses that you identified that day.
Mm.
When you spoke with him, were you wearing a body camera or anything like that to document what he was saying at the time?
I believe I was, yes.
Did you have an opportunity to review that prior to your testimony today?
I reviewed parts of it, yes.
And specifically with respect to Mr. Solis, when you did speak with Mr. Solis, did you at the time note down in a notepad what he had mentioned to you, or is that even something that was even plausible at the time?
Usually in my notepad, I just write down their information. And then I ask them to recant what they remember, and that's what I try to put on the report.
Now, you indicated that you also spoke with an individual by the name of Christopher Reed, correct?
Correct.
And when you spoke with Mr. Reed specifically, you again asked him what he observed at the time, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, when speaking with Mr. Reed, again, based on what you can recall, if you can recall, Mr. Reed at that time said that he saw the
Objection, Your Honor.
victim
You're
and
saying,
the
Your
suspect.
Honor.
Sustain.
It's not for the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor.
Then what is it being offered for? If the
That-
objection is
that
gonna be,
Mr. Reed, that Mr. Reed said, made the statement.
Your Honor, may we approach?
no, sustained.
Mr. Dominguez.
Hmm.
What, if anything, and you indicated that Mr. Reed was not cooperative, correct? Did he provide you address?
I don't recall.
Okay, did he provide you his phone number?
I believe so. Like I said, I don't recall. I can look at the report and just see if it's there if you want me to.
Sure, you can refresh your memory.
So it looks like he did provide an address and phone number
Would you agree with me that that's being fairly cooperative?
to that. Yeah.
And specifically as far as, let me ask you this, so in cases that you're on now, 2 years after that incident, would you agree with me that that body cam footage of your interactions with these witnesses, would you agree with me that that is the most and the best representation of what actually was said at that time? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree.
And yet, did you provide that to the state so that they could see what Mr. Reed actually told you?
The body camera?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you aware of if the state at any point has presented that to you for purposes of reviewing it to remember what they said?
Have they showed it to me? Is that your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they've showed it to me.
Would you agree that statements made by these individuals are important for cases like this?
I would agree.
Why are statements made by these individuals important?
Because
Your Honor, relevant.
Officer, if you're gonna say something that somebody else said, I'm gonna sustain the objection. Do you understand? So if you can answer the question and you're not gonna say what someone said, then you can answer the question.
it just tells the story of what happened when I wasn't there.
And without telling me what Mr. Reed actually told you, you would agree that those pieces of information are extremely important for figuring out what actually took place when you weren't there.
Usually, yes.
And what do you mean by usually?
Sometimes people say stuff like, oh, I just heard a shot and I turned around and I saw different things happening. So those, it's not really witnesses. It's just, oh, I heard something.
And as far as what Mr. Reed actually said, again, without telling me what he said, the jury does not have that to take into consideration. Would you agree with that?
What do you mean?
At this moment, the jury does not have what Mr. Reed provided to you for them to consider. Would you agree with that?
I don't,
Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
No further questions for this witness, Judge.
State.
Last witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Dominguez, in the training that you received regarding the Code of Criminal Procedure and the Penal Code, did you learn about the offense of unauthorized use of the motor vehicle?
yes,
Would you have probable cause to arrest a passenger in a vehicle for unauthorized use of the motor vehicle?
no,
Would you have probable cause to arrest the passenger of the vehicle for theft of vehicle?
no,
And then in regards to the training that you received, dealing with fire alarms, at times when you have to unholster your firearm, I guess, how are you trained to aim it?
it depends on the situation. So if there's a threat, there's an active threat, it's direct to threat.
And if you're
Right.
aiming it at someone, do you have your finger on the trigger or not on the trigger?
If I'm aiming it at a threat, it should be on the trigger.
And so when you're aiming it at a threat, sorry, let me rephrase. Are you trained to aim your firearm at someone only if you receive or perceive a threat?
Am I trained to point my firearm at somebody if they're a threat? Is that what it's
At any threat?
not just at any threat, it's just if I feel that my life is in danger or somebody else's life is in danger.
Pass the witness, Judge.
Defense.
Officer Dominguez, if someone's pulling at your firearm, is that a danger to you?
That would be a danger to me.
And if you witnessed an individual smoking methamphetamine, would you have probable cause to arrest them for that?
I would have probable cause to detain.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
State.
No further questions, Judge.
Is this witness excused or subject for recall? All
Excuse, Your Honor.
Excuse.
right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state and attorneys for the defense. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right, you may sit down. State, call your next
I
witness.
leave this.
Judge, the state would call James 5.
Please,
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a short break. I just need to take up a matter outside your presence, okay? You've heard some of the testimony in this case. You're not allowed to discuss it among yourselves. You're not allowed to start deliberating. Just make sure you keep your badges visible. So we're going to be back at no later than 2:45. So that should give everyone enough time. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, so it's going to be a voir dire of the witness, not cross-examination of the witness to then come back and cross-examine them again. All right, call your next witness.
State would call James 5. They'll be separate within your knowledge. Oh, okay. By the jury.
All right, can you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, if you could have a seat, state your name for the record, please.
So I need both. My name is Dr. James Feig.
All right. Defense, you wanted to take the witness on board here?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Feig, you. What? Oh, Dr. Feig, just to narrow it down, as far as what expert opinions are you prepared to give on the actual gunshot itself?
So my expertise is as a medical examiner, and with a gunshot wound, the medical examiner will determine what type of wound it is, whether it's penetrating or perforating, meaning is there a bullet inside the body or did it go through and through? The entry, what the range of fire is, whether it's consistent with a contact range, intermediate, or distant. The pathway through the body, for example, front to back, and the injuries involved with the gunshot wound.
Okay, let me go to the second part. You said range of fire, the contact intermediate or distant. What facts or data do you rely on, or did you rely on to come to a conclusion in this case?
The range of fire entails looking at the entry gunshot wound, and there are certain characteristics with each of those. For example, with the contact range, we would expect to see searing of the skin because of the contact of the hot muzzle, in addition to soot deposition. With an intermediate range, we would expect to see a phenomenon called powder tattooing, which some people call stippling. If the intermediate range is actually still very close to the body, we would call that a near. So that's technically another category. At a certain point, however, the only thing that will hit the body is the bullet itself. And at that point, we consider that a distant gunshot wound.
What are those? Are there certain distances, or is it just a generic term?
So what I am looking at are the characteristics of the wound, and that allows me to characterize the gunshot range of fire as distant, intermediate, near contact. The exact range, although there are ranges that I can give and an exact distance would have to be obtained by test firing the actual weapon.
And did you do that in this case?
I mean, I don't do that as the medical examiner.
Okay, so you won't be able to testify to an exact range, is that right?
An exact range? No, I think that, I don't know that anyone would be able to do that, even the firearms.
Well, I guess, let me ask you, what expert opinion on the range are you prepared to give today?
Well, there are general characteristics of how far away a handgun would be when you get to that point. So it's a general based on accumulated data that are in textbooks and that I received in training and through my years of experience. But again, it's a general range. So I can't give you a specific.
Are you, I guess, are you prepared to give an estimate as far as inches or feet, or is it, are you?
I can give an estimate.
And are that's part of your expert opinion that you're prepared to give today?
Yes, it is.
Okay, what is that?
That range would be somewhere between 2.5 and 3 feet.
And what facts or data did you rely on in this case to come to that conclusion?
So again, looking at the characteristics of the wound, which suggests that it's a distant gunshot wound for range of fire, and coupling that with my knowledge base as part of my duties as a medical examiner.
Are there, I think you've mentioned a general range based on that. Are there other things that someone can look at that you were not able to do to help determine the range of fire?
So I think the problem is that I am not looking at the firearm, right? So if there's an individual characteristic of the gun itself, I don't have knowledge of that. So that's why my assessment is general sort of thing. So I'm saying you can imagine like a typical handgun of this type, this would be the range. Does that make sense?
Sure. So a more, and correct me if I'm asking the question wrong, a more scientific or accurate range could be given for someone who tested the actual firearm itself?
I agree with that.
And I think you mentioned, just to be clear, you were trained on the range of fire through your years of training and experience. You've had this specific training?
Yes.
Okay, and you're familiar with research and articles?
I probably can't name the author, but yes, I've done a fair amount of reading.
Fair enough. Now, when you said it sounds like kind of your ultimate opinion would be general range of 2.5 to 3 feet. Could that be less or more depending on other factors?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all.
All right, State.
Just very, very briefly, Dr. Feig, and that is based on your training? Correct?
Yes.
Is it based on your experience?
Training and experience.
And how many autopsies approximate have you done in your lifetime?
Autopsies, somewhere around 2,500.
And did a portion of those consist of gunshot wounds?
Yeah, unfortunately, in San Antonio, a significant portion are gunshot wounds.
And your testimony as to the general basis of your scientific opinion is based on that experience and training, correct?
That's correct.
Nothing from the state judge.
All right, anything else from the defense?
No, Judge, I would just make the objection now, and it's a testimony on range of fire, that it's a general range. The more accurate would be to test the firearm itself. So we would object to that specific testimony or question.
State.
Judge, he has testified that he's testified on these cases, and this is a general range. However, it is based on his training and experience. We're going to have lots of cases where handguns are not recovered. There is something to the fact that he has spent his career doing these types of autopsies, doing these things. That's why it is a general range. We believe that what Mr. Allen is talking about, he's more than able to cross-examine on those issues But Dr. Feig is an expert. He is testifying from his expert base and as to things that that he can give an expert opinion on, and that expert opinions are given on these type of cases every day. This is information that will assist the jury in making their determination on this case, and I believe he's sufficiently qualified as an expert to give it.
All right, the witness will be allowed to testify as to the fact that obviously he's said that it wasn't at close range because there wasn't the stippling effect that he says he normally sees. So he's allowed to testify that it wasn't close range if that's his testimony. And he's allowed to give the reason for why he feels, in his expert opinion, why it wasn't at close range. But as far as for the specific distance, he will not be allowed to testify about what the specific distance is.
Is he allowed, I'm sorry, is he allowed to give a range like he had testified? Is he allowed to give the range that he said? I know he said he can't, he can never give a specific distance. Is he allowed to give the range that he said he would expect?
Well, the state, you can question him as to what is close, what would he consider close range, and that this was not close range, if that is his expert testimony.
Understood.
Is there anything else from either side?
No, Your
All right, Deputy Laura, if, I told the jury 2:45, but if they're ready to come back, we can bring them back. Is there going to be any other expert that needs to be voir dire?
Our next witness is David Pendleton. I'm not sure if they'll have objections. So.
All right, are you going to have any objections to Mr. To the next expert?
Is he giving a specific range? No. Okay. Then no, Judge.
Okay, thank you.
Which obviously in this, being the medical examiner, we are going to show some pictures from the autopsy. So I don't know if that, I know some judges will tell the jury, but I just wanted to let you know, obviously, that's what we will be doing during this witness.
All right. Okay. All right, and are there family members here of the complainant? Are they aware?
Yeah.
All right, so to the family members, I understand that this may be painful, but I cannot have outbursts in the room because otherwise we may end up having to start this whole process over again, okay? All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. All right, everyone, please be seated. State, call your next witness.
The state would call Dr. James Feig.
All right, and Mr. Fife has previously been sworn in. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the jury, this witness's testimony has to do with the autopsy, okay? All right, state, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Feig, could you introduce yourself to the jury?
I am Dr. Feig. I am a forensic pathologist and medical examiner. I work at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office. I joined the office in 2014 after having served out a military career in San Antonio. The function of what I do at the office is to perform postmortem examinations for the reason of establishing a cause of death, a manner of death, and documenting disease and injury processes. The training involved to get to the point of being able to do that for my particular situation involves a Bachelor of Science degree from Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon, which was obtained way back in 1989, followed by medical school, which I attended at the Uniformed Services University in Bethesda, Maryland, followed by an internal medicine internship here in San Antonio, followed by a pathology residency here in San Antonio, and finally followed by a forensic pathology fellowship, also here in San Antonio. During the course of these educational activities, I have sat for and become board certified in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology.
Dr. Feig, the things you just talked about, your education, are those things that assist you in your job as a medical examiner?
Yes.
You mentioned how long have you been a forensic examiner here at the ME's office?
At the ME's office here in San Antonio for 8 years, and then 12 years prior to that in the military.
And in addition to your education, is there also trainings and certifications that you must achieve to be a medical examiner?
The primary certifications are the board examinations, which allow you to have a diploma, which state that you are board certified in a given specialty, in this case, forensic pathology. But in addition to that, there is a requirement for something called continued medical education, which all doctors have to undergo to show that they do continuous lifelong learning.
And I believe you mentioned autopsies. Is that one of your duties in your current position?
So in order to arrive at our opinions on someone's cause and manner of death, the problem is the person is deceased. And so we have to rely on our postmortem examination. And that does typically involve taking a look at what's known about the circumstances of a death and doing an external examination of the body, and then doing an internal examination of the body, which is the part where we take out a scalpel and what most people think of as the autopsy. In addition to that, an important factor is toxicology sampling.
How many autopsies would you say you do a month at the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office?
I'm not even sure how to calculate that. On a daily basis, we typically do 7 to 8 autopsies. So multiply that by 30.
Can you talk to the jury about the criteria for what types of bodies come to the medical examiner's office?
The medical examiner has independent authority to take jurisdiction in death cases. And the times in which we take that jurisdiction typically involve a death wherein it is unknown how a person died, or they are not under a physician's care, or there's a suspicion of a toxic ingestion or poisoning, or a suspicion of trauma.
Would gunshot wounds fall into that category?
So things like gunshot wounds, stab wounds, blunt force injuries, those are all trauma conditions in which the medical examiner would get involved.
So in your career, have you examined bodies with gunshot wounds?
I have.
On few or many occasions?
On many occasions.
And have you testified to juries before about bodies that have gunshot wounds?
I have.
Okay. On few or many occasions?
Many an occasion.
Can you tell us a little bit, just primarily about the process when a body comes to the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office, what your general process of what you do?
Yeah, so I've already alluded to this a little bit, but we typically have more than one body, and we organize how we're going to approach things by, one, taking a look at what we know about the circumstances of someone's death, and then deciding what type of examination to do based upon that. The answer is oftentimes an autopsy. And when an autopsy is performed, the components of that, again, are going to be an external examination, which is sort of a physical like you would have from your personal physician, a head to toe examination, except my patient's dead, obviously. And then after that, we open the body and look inside at the organs. And in addition, at that time, we collect blood and possibly other tissues for toxicology testing.
Dr. Feig, today we called you to testify regarding an autopsy that you performed on or around the 28th of September on 2020, correct?
That is correct.
And you have a copy of your report up there, correct? As to the report you created when you did that autopsy.
I do.
Can you tell the jury who the individual was who you did the autopsy on?
The deceased in question is Michael Cepeda, a 33-year-old male.
And does the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office assign a unique case number to each autopsy that occurs?
So when we do our workload and talk about our cases, we refer to them by the number that we generate for them. And the reason for that is occasionally we will have an unidentified body. So we really don't know their name, or there may even be a situation where it is thought that we know who someone is, but it's not. For example, maybe there are two different passengers inside of a car involved in a motor vehicle accident. And it may seem that one person is who we think it is based upon maybe having a wallet, but later on when we do fingerprints, we may find out that that wallet had just been loaned. So at any rate, to avoid any confusion, we refer to our cases by number. And so for Mr. Cepeda, the number that was generated for his case is 2020-2483. And the way we generate those numbers is very simple. It just starts out at the beginning of the year, January 1st, with case number 1, and then it goes up to however many numbers we would need for that year.
Dr. Feig, in addition to your performance of the autopsy, are photos taken of the subject of the autopsy?
So during the course of the examination, I prepare a written report. If there's trauma, I will supplement that with a body diagram and also supplement it with pictures that show that show the trauma.
Were photos taken in Mr. Cepeda's autopsy?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Dr. Feig, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 13 through 17. Can you take a look at these photos and tell me if you recognize these photos?
Yes, these are photos I took at the time of the autopsy.
And do those clearly and accurately represent the photos of the autopsy that you took on this date?
Yes.
Okay. And do they appear to be altered or amended in any way?
No.
State would offer State's Exhibits 13 through 17.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, State's Exhibit 13 through 17 is admitted without objection.
Approach the witness again, Judge.
Yes.
Like, the first photo, can you tell us what we're looking at in State's Exhibit 13?
This is what we call an intake or sometimes an identification photograph. And what we do here is show our generated case number with the deceased's face.
Let me correct myself. I said what we're looking at. You and I are looking at it. But I wanted to just show the jury this one, not on the projector. Can you hold that picture up and show the jury the picture in State's Exhibit number 13? And can you, and I'll leave this right here, is there, what is the purpose of that photo?
But again, it shows the facial characteristics with our case number. In a typical case, it can be used to identify the deceased. For example, a family member may come in and look at the deceased and say, yes, that's, Uncle Joe, or whatever the case may be. And they can see the case number so that they know that the autopsy report belongs to their loved one. We do this for every case. In some cases, though, it's not as relevant. For example, someone may be, burned beyond recognition or something like that, where the facial features are not recognizable, but we will still go ahead and take the photograph.
Regarding this particular autopsy, in reviewing your report and what you know about this autopsy, can you tell us when this individual arrived at the ME's office, I guess, in relation to the actual incident that occurred? Was this the same day that the incident occurred?
So I only know what I'm going to answer based on our investigative information, but my understanding is that the actual incident occurred on the 21st of September, and the body did not arrive in the medical examiner's office until the 27th of September. In that interim period, he had been in the hospital and eventually underwent organ harvesting.
In regards to this particular autopsy, did you see any evidence of a gunshot wound?
Yes, there is a gunshot wound of the head.
Aside from the gunshot wound, what can you tell me about the rest of the body?
So for any case, we're looking not only for evidence of trauma, but for evidence of natural disease also. In this particular case, I saw a gunshot wound of the head. I did not see evidence of natural disease. However, there is a caveat there because not all of the organs were present in the body. Specifically, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, and part of the pancreas were absent due to the fact that they were harvested for organ donation and transplant. The surgeons that do that, they do fill out paperwork that says if they see anything amiss. They usually just say something to the effect of normal. They tend to be very brief, but I did review that paperwork at the time.
And did you find that any of that stuff you weren't able to see would have affected your opinion as to the cause of death?
No. So the gunshot wound of the head is a devastating injury that, in my opinion, would be non-survivable. So almost regardless of what sort of natural disease may have been present, the gunshot wound of the head would be the cause of death.
And so, Dr. Feig, let's talk about that gunshot wound. Can you tell us what injuries Mr. Cepeda's body had that led you to believe that there was a gunshot wound?
So, and hopefully I'll be able to supplement with a photograph soon, but there are two defects of the head. There is a defect below the right ear on the right side of the head, and then there's a second defect on the left side of the head. These defects on internal examination of the head hook up with each other so they connect, and there is no bullet inside of the head, and that's confirmed with an X-ray. So what that tells us is that this is a perforating or through and through gunshot wound, meaning there's an entry defect, there's an exit defect, and there's no bullet retained in the body.
Dr. Feig, and just permission to publish the previously admitted exhibit.
Yes, granted. And just one moment before you do that. Excuse me, to the interpreter, is it time for you all to switch out?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may switch out. You're welcome. Everyone, just give us a moment while we switch out interpreters.
Your Honor, thank you. The interpreter's ready.
All right, could you raise your right hand for me,
Yes, Your
please?
Honor.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm you will faithfully translate from English into Spanish and Spanish into English, so help you God?
I do, Your Honor.
All right, if you can lower your hand and state your name for the record.
Mariana Rios.
All right, and could you check to see if the equipment is working?
Yes, Your Honor. He responded affirmatively.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, state, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge.
I'm publishing first what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 14. Can you see that out there, Dr. Feig?
I can.
And number 14, can you tell us what we're looking at in State's Exhibit 14?
This is a picture of the right side of the head, and it's actually showing us the entry gunshot wound defect I had mentioned earlier.
I show you State's Exhibit number 15. Can you tell us what's in State's Exhibit number 15?
This is just a close-up view. The prior photograph is to show us where on the body the defect is located. And then the close-up is supposed to show us the details of the wound itself. But we need both of them, because if I just showed you this picture, it may or may not be obvious to you where on the body it is.
And in looking at these photos, can you tell us where we're looking at on Mr. Cepeda?
Yeah, so for this photograph, I can actually still tell that it is the right side of the head because of the ear in the photograph. There are cases, though, where, for example, it may be like in the center of the abdomen or something like that. And if I did a close-up view of that, you wouldn't be able to tell where it was.
You mentioned that this is the entrance wound. Can you explain to the jury why you know this to be the entrance wound on Mr. Cepeda?
So the wound here, the defect, has a rounded appearance, which is typical of a gunshot entry. And in addition, there is a rim of abraded skin where the epidermis, the outer layer, has been rubbed off, and we are left with the underlying pink dermis, that rim. That also happens because when the bullet goes through the skin, it literally rubs off that outer layer and then imparts this dermal edge or ring. In addition, there is bruising around the entry defect. I think that may or may not be partly because of the time in the hospital to allow for this contusion to develop. If this had been at the time of the shooting, I'm not sure it would be this prominent in terms of the bruising.
And so what we're looking at in State's Exhibit number 15, you would expect the exit wound to look different than that, correct?
The exit wound is typically more irregular, sometimes even just looking like a tear, but it shouldn't really have this nice rounded appearance with that rim.
I'm going to show you what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit 16. Can you tell me what we're looking at in 16?
So this is looking at the other side of the head, the left side of the head, and we see another defect. This one is the exit defect. And I think, is there a close-up of this one?
And there is, that's the the fourth picture that we admitted in that collection. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 17. Is that the close-up?
Yeah, so you can see that this defect does not really have that rounded configuration. It's more sort of haphazard or irregular. And it doesn't have a nice bordering rim as the other one did. So this is characteristic of an exit, whereas the other defect we saw is characteristic of an entry. So that gives us an entry on the right side of the head and an exit on the left side of the head.
I believe earlier you mentioned to the jury that as part of your examination, at times you'll make a diagram of the body to show where specific pieces of trauma are to situate on the body, correct?
Correct.
And was that done in this particular case?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 18. Is that a copy of that diagram?
It is.
And is that the diagram you created in connection to this case?
Yes,
Does it have the case number from this case written on it?
it does.
Would it assist the jury in being able to see where the things we're talking about in the photos are on the human body?
I think it might, because one, there's no distraction from the actual graphic nature of the photograph. And then also it shows both of the defects in one viewing rather than having to flip back and forth between different photographs.
Judge, at this time, state what offer State's Exhibit number 18.
No,
Right, State's Exhibit number 18 is admitted.
And permission to publish, Judge?
Granted. And Dr. Fife, I do believe you can mark on the screen if it needs to be marked on the screen.
Oh, okay.
All right, so State's Exhibit number 18 is that diagram, Dr. Fife. Can you just explain to the jury what that diagram is showing to the jury?
So the diagram is a sort of quick reference as to what is being talked about in the autopsy report in the text section, in addition to the photographs of the autopsy. I'm going to give a quick caveat here. For the most part, medical examiners are not artists, so they use these pre-fabricated body diagrams. And in a case where there may be injuries to multiple parts of the body, I would use a body diagram of the whole body. But in this particular case for Mr. Cepeda, the injuries are of the head, and so I have a head-only body diagram, so to speak. At any rate, it is depicting the entry defect, the exit defect, and also something that I'm calling the prominent ecchymosis.
Can you tell us what that is?
So, yes, would it be possible to display the intake photograph?
I can, if you want to explain what that is during that portion of it.
So the intake identification photograph was not taken specifically for this purpose, but it happens to show, I think, in the best way what I'm going to explain next. And so what's being shown here is that there is this purple bruising that sort of closely approximates the eyebrows, and it goes onto the bridge of the nose and onto the eyelids somewhat as well. So this is a bruise. I will tell you, it's an unusual bruise. I haven't really seen one that's confined for the most part to the eyebrows like this. So I don't have a great scientific explanation of why that is, but he does have a bruise of the forehead nevertheless.
Do you believe that to be related to the gunshot wound?
I don't have a good way of knowing that for sure.
Does that change any of your opinions as to which one's the entrance wound or the exit wound or any of those things that you notice on the gunshot wound?
So this detail is really, from my perspective, independent of the gunshot wound.
I'm going to show State's Exhibit 18 again. In your autopsy, we showed, or I'm sorry, the diagram here shows the entry wound below the right ear, and then the exit wound kind of above or at the top of the left ear and maybe a little bit behind it. Is part of your autopsy, do you attempt to find a direction of travel in gunshot cases?
For a gunshot wound, we will give the pathway or the direction through the body. So for this particular gunshot wound, it is going right to front, it's going upward, and it's going a little bit front to back.
And so right here, right to left, correct? Slightly upward, sorry, behind, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and slightly upward, and did you say front to back slightly?
Right. So the again, that's rather slight, but the entry, let me see if I can even explain this. The entry below the right ear is more forward than the exit, which is behind the ear. So that gives us an overall front to back, even though it's really not much. And it's the major component is clearly going to be the right to left aspect, followed by the upward aspect, and the least amount of deviation, so to speak, is that front to back.
In looking at gunshot wounds during an autopsy, are there things in your training experience and education that allow you to make some determinations as to distance from the firearm?
Yes. So for an entry gunshot defect, there are certain characteristics that correlate with what we call contact range firing, near contact firing, intermediate firing, and distant firing. And I just want to tell the jury up front, the determination of a distant gunshot wound does not really mean that the gunshot wound is far away. It just means that it's far away enough from the body that the only thing striking the body is the bullet and nothing else.
And in relation to gunshot wounds involving handguns, can you tell us what you would expect to see on a contact wound?
All right, so I'm just going to go through the different ranges. A contact range means that the muzzle of the weapon is in contact with the skin of the body. When that happens, there are several things that we may see on the entry defect. One is a searing phenomena or burning due to the hot gases coming out of the muzzle. Another one is soot deposition into the wound and edges of the wound. Another one that we may or may not see is an imprint of the end of the muzzle, such as seeing something like a recoil spring guide rod or a sight. So that is contact. As we start coming away from the skin up to about maybe an inch, so we're still really close, we lose a lot of those characteristics, but we see a bigger distribution of soot around the wound. Then as we start going a little further away from that, maybe in the realm of 2 inches or so, 1.5, 2 inches, we start seeing a phenomenon we call powder tattooing. And what that is that as the bullet leaves the muzzle, unburned powder grains go with it. And we are far enough away from the skin that those are going to strike the skin and leave a mark. But we are not far away enough that they fall off before they get to the skin. And so anyway, when they impact the skin, they actually make these tiny, I call them punctate abrasion marks. They're like pink dots. But they're actually tiny abrasions. And again, that effect is due to powder grains impacting the skin. Again, when we start getting far enough away, only the bullet will hit the body. And at that point, we call it a distant gunshot wound. The point at which that happens varies by the gun type. Although for a handgun, it has been said that the general range is going to be around 2.5 to 3 feet. Again, I'm going to give you a caveat. The best way to actually determine that would be to test fire the gun in question.
So let me show you. State's Exhibit 15. Is this going to be the best photo to talk about those things we just talked about?
Yes.
Based on what you see there in State's Exhibit 15, do you see any evidence of a contact gunshot wound?
No.
And you said a contact gunshot wound would be up against the skin?
That's correct.
What was the next category that you mentioned?
Near contact.
Do you see any evidence of a near contact wound?
I do not.
And what was the next category?
Intermediate.
And do you see any evidence of intermediate gunshot wound?
I do not.
Can you tell me, does the wound appear to be consistent with a distant gunshot wound?
So to me, this is consistent with a distant gunshot wound. It's actually the type of defect I sort of refer to myself as a naked gunshot wound defect, meaning that we essentially have the hole that was created by the bullet and nothing else. So some of the characteristics I talked about earlier, such as searing, a muzzle imprint, soot deposition, and powder tattooing, none of that is present in this photo. And I hate to do this, but I'm going to give you another caveat because there is a complicating factor for this case. And that is that Mr. Cepeda was in the hospital for about 7 days before I saw him. So the question is, could there have been interim healing? And if so, to what extent? So if we think about this, if someone receives a gunshot wound and they live, and it was an intermediate range gunshot wound, at some point, it's going to heal and those little stippling abrasions are going to go away. The problem for me is that there has been surprisingly little written down about what that time period is, to the best of my knowledge. So what I would like to say is that there is certainly no imprint abrasion from the muzzle. There's no burning or searing around it. We know that because the dermis is pink, not burned. And there's no soot deposition. I think it may have been possible for soot to have been wiped away at some point between the shooting and when I see this defect. I just don't really know that. The powder tattooing for me is the issue wherein I don't know for sure, because I would think if there's powder tattooing associated with a gunshot wound, I would still be able to see some evidence of it instead of like absolutely nothing. But I don't know for sure what that time period is. So I hope that makes sense.
Would having a photo of the entrance wound nearer in time to when this occurred, maybe as near as right after it happened, would that assist you?
Okay. Yeah, it would.
Permission to publish, Judge?
Granted.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 12, which is a photo previously admitted as a photo of Michael Cepeda at the scene where he was shot. Does that assist your opinion at all?
It does.
Okay. Can you tell the jury why?
All right. So one, the location of the defect in this photo and my photo are the same. So I think we're looking at the same defect. It's on the right side of the head. It's below the ear. One thing of note to me is that on my photograph at autopsy, there's bruising around this defect. Here, there's not. So I think that actually supports something I said earlier that maybe the bruising developed over time while being in the hospital. But at any rate, the wound itself is still a wound I would describe as naked, meaning I don't see things like soot or searing or muzzle imprint abrasion or powder tattooing.
So after viewing that photo, along with the photos you took at the time of autopsy, do you believe the gunshot wound is consistent with either contact gunshot, the close range, the near contact, or the intermediate gun range?
So for me, taking everything into account, the overall range of firing, as the medical examiner calls it, is consistent with the distant. But keep in mind that distant category only means that nothing else but the bullet is hitting the skin. So it doesn't mean that the shooting happened like from across the room, for example, although it could have.
But you don't see evidence of intermediate gun range, correct?
Right. So the shorthand way of saying this is that there's no evidence of close range firing, which encompasses everything closer than the distant cutoff.
And can you tell us what the distant cutoff was again?
So I can give you a general range, and it's generally going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 feet. Again, the best indicator of that, although even then you'd probably get a range, not a specific distance, would be to test fire the weapon.
Dr. Feig, in addition to examining the trauma to the body, do you also conduct a toxicology test?
We do perform toxicology, yes.
And was that done on this particular autopsy?
Yes.
What were the results of that?
The toxicology testing is negative for Mr. Cepeda.
Is there a caveat to tell the jury about that toxicology?
There is. So, and this sort of all relates back to the same thing. The blood tested for toxicology is done for completeness, but if we think about it, he has been in the hospital. So he has had several days to metabolize a theoretical or hypothetical drug that may have been present. So my toxicology testing, even though it's negative, doesn't really shed that much light, if any, about what may or may not have been in his system at the time of shooting. All right, I hope that makes sense.
We'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Vince?
Dr. Feig, how tall was Michael Cepeda?
I have him listed as 5'10".
Did you, do you measure, for lack of a medical term, the wingspan of a person?
In select cases, I did not do that in this case.
You say in select cases, so if the prosecutor or detective say this may be an issue, then you could do that.
I could do that if the at the time of doing the examination, if I think that may be an issue, I will go ahead and measure it on my own. I unfortunately didn't really know that was going to be an issue for this case. So we do not have, and your term is fine, we don't have the wingspan.
Okay, and you talked about the direction, and just to make sure, so it's an upward direction, correct?
Correct.
And you said right to front.
Right to left.
Right to left, and then a little from front to back.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you talked about the range and close range of firing. Now, to go back to the state's exhibit that we're looking at here, is that the first time you saw this?
The first time I saw this picture is today.
Okay. And you talked about soot. Now, soot can be
wiped away, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if somebody's treating the wound or attempting to treat the wound, that could wipe away.
It could wipe away some. The thing is that the soot is sort of sticky. It's hard to wipe away all of it. Maybe if you several applications, let's say, but if someone is doing like life-saving procedures and they happen to wipe at the wound, that usually I would not think would remove all of the soot. Although yes, it would wipe some of it away.
And you talk about, I'm giving you a general distance of 2.5 to 3 feet, is that right?
That's right.
Now, are there other intervening factors or other things that where you wouldn't see soot or stippling?
So, and that's a good point. So, and the reason people are a little bit hesitant to give very specific numbers for this is that there are variables. And so the best that can be done is a range. But with a certain type of gun, there may be individual examples of that gun that are a little bit different, that have items coming out of the muzzle that travel further than most of the other guns of its type, or a gun may have really tight fit and not allow contents exiting the muzzle to travel as far as expected. So again, that would be something for the individual testing to establish a little bit better. The other problem would be that if there is an intermediary object, that would filter out some of these residues. So for example, if you shot someone from, let's say, a foot away, but it was through a piece of plywood, the wound that would be produced on the body would look like a distant gunshot wound to me. So you have to know about that intermediary object. For that reason, some people actually call a distant gunshot wound an indeterminate gunshot wound, if we can't account for whether or not there was an intermediary object. The other thing is that, and I don't think that's an issue here, but if someone is wearing something like a heavy coat on their body, that would filter out some of the debris exiting the muzzle. And in that situation, we would want to look at the clothing as well. So does that answer your question?
Yes, and I think you said an indeterminate, is it indeterminate distance or range? Is that what you said?
Either way works.
Okay. In this case, are you aware that there's surveillance video in the case?
I am not aware of that.
Okay. Were you asked to review any witness statements or surveillance video before giving your opinion?
No.
And again, just to be clear, so I think it's your testimony that the best way or most accurate way to get a range of fire would be to test fire the actual gun itself. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And based on those factors, the intervening or intermediate objects, the gun itself, that range of 2.5 to 3 feet could be more, it could be less.
It may be adjusted if we had some of that information, yes.
And again, you're just here to base it on what you know in your training and education, right?
Right. And I hope I've laid that out. With the entry defects have certain characteristics which allow us to make that range of fire determination. The interpretation of the exact distance that turns out, that's a little bit more difficult to do. And again, that's why there's only a sort of general range given.
Now I want to move on to the toxicology. You mentioned that there's the caveat that Mr. Cepeda was in the hospital for about 7 days. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, so your toxicology, again, nothing came back detected, right?
That's correct.
Are you aware that at the hospital, there was methamphetamine that came back positive?
I did not know that. I'm not surprised though. I
Okay.
mean, I'm not surprised that it doesn't show up on my toxicology.
Sure, and that's not something that you were asked to review, is that fair?
That's a little outside my purview, yes.
But again, you gave the caveat of why something may show up in hospital records, but not in your records.
Right. And this is all really dependent on time. So all drugs in the body get metabolized, some at different rates depending on what type of drug it is. But after several days, I would think that virtually any drug is going to be entirely gone.
Now, based on your education and experience, are you familiar with the effects of methamphetamine use?
So, I mean, methamphetamine can have different effects on an individual that can range from you really can't tell that they are on methamphetamine to a sort of like rage-like, angry sort of situation. And also it may cause someone not to remember the actions that they were taking while they were on the drug. And obviously there's what's called a highness component to the drug as well.
Thank you, Dr. Frank. No further questions.
All right, state.
Nothing further from the state. Your Honor, may he be excused?
All right, is this witness excused or subject to recall?
Excuse, Your Honor.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone if you're only allowed to talk to attorneys for the state and the defense. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State, call your next witness.
They call David Pendleton.
Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you can have a seat, and if you'll state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is David Pendleton. That's Pendleton.
All right, and could you make sure that you speak up because so the jury can hear, I can hear, the court reporter and the interpreter.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, state.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Pendleton, how are you currently employed?
I'm a firearms examiner at the Bexar County Criminal Investigation Laboratory.
How long have you been employed as a firearms examiner?
Approximately 16 and a half years.
Has all of that time been with Bexar County?
Yes, sir.
What type of educational background do you have?
I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in justice policy, both from the University of Texas at San Antonio.
What type of training did you have to undergo to become a firearms examiner?
The majority of the training is within the laboratory. We also do outside training when available. And once trained, we are proficiency tested yearly by an outside agency. I'm also a member of the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners, and I'm certified in the area of firearms identification by that organization.
And is the Bexar County Criminal Laboratory licensed by the state of Texas?
Yes, sir, it is.
Does it hold any other licenses?
Yes, sir. ANAB accreditation. It's an accrediting agency that checks to see if your laboratories are adhering to SOPs that are accepted in the scientific community.
What are some of your duties as a firearms examiner with Bexar County?
On a daily basis, I'll examine firearms. I test fire them. I also examine ammunition components, both fired and unfired. With fired components such as bullets and cartridge cases, I attempt to see if they were or determine if they were fired in the same firearm.
Do you have an estimate of how many firearms you examined?
It would be really hard to say. We do a couple hundred a year, I would say.
So would it be safe to say thousands?
Yes, sir.
And have you testified before?
Yes, sir.
Specifically in regards to why you're here today, were you asked to examine a firearm involved in SAPD case number 2017-98-72?
I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat that number?
Yes, sir. 2017-98-92.
Yes, sir. I was.
What were you asked to do in regards to that firearm?
I was asked to examine a firearm to determine if it was in working condition, if its safeties were working properly. I was also asked to examine a single fired cartridge case and to see if I could determine whether or not it was fired in that firearm.
Do you have a serial number for the firearm that you received?
Yes, sir, I do.
What was that serial number?
SBU 020345.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Mr. Pendleton, I'm showing you what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit 9. Can you open the contents of that and tell me if you recognize it?
Take things out.
Take it out, yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I do recognize these items.
Is that the firearm that you were asked to examine for this case?
Yes, sir.
And so can you tell the jury what sort of examination did you perform on this firearm?
Standard firearms examination basically just consists of a checklist. We're going to document, obviously, the pertinent case information. Then we're going to do the general aspects of the firearm, such as its make, model, caliber, serial number. Then we will check its safeties that are designed on the weapon to see if it's safe to fire. And then we will actually test fire the weapon. In most cases, we fire it twice, particularly with a semi-automatic firearm. That way we can ascertain whether the cycling of the firearm is working as designed. So that's what I would have done in this case.
Were you able to, and actually, before we get to that, can you tell the jury what items that you received from the San Antonio Police Department?
Yes, sir. I received a 40 caliber Smith & Wesson, a 40 Smith & Wesson caliber Sig Sauer pistol, which is this pistol, 2 magazines with ammunition in them, a third magazine with ammunition, and then the single fired cartridge case.
In regards to your testing of the actual firearm, were you able to make a determination as to whether or not it was in proper working condition?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was that determination?
It was in working order.
And then you said you also received a single fired cartridge casing?
Yes, sir.
And what was the purpose of receiving that?
I was asked to determine if whether or not it was fired in the submitted firearm.
Can you tell the jury, how are you able to determine whether or not a casing was fired from a firearm?
In a case such as this, where we have a firearm, as I said, we fire the weapon twice. There's also another reason we fire it twice is because we're collecting cartridge cases and bullets that we tested and fired from the weapon. These are called knowns. We know where they came from because we fired them from the weapon. I will look under these under a microscope, and I will look at what's called class characteristics, which are general in nature, the caliber, the shape of the firing pin, things like that. Then I will also look for individual characteristics. These are fine markings that are left from the firing, whether imprinted from the firearm or striated by scraping against something in the firearm. They're unique to that. So we see if there's sufficient agreement to compare them to any questioned evidence. With the questioned evidence, we're going to see first, does it have the same class? If they don't have the same class, then we can just exclude it. It's apples and oranges. They're different calibers, or the firing pins are definitely shaped differently. We don't need to go any further. But if the class is similar, then we compare the individual characteristics and see if we can find those same markings. And we do that using what's called a comparison microscope, which is essentially two microscopes that you look at through one set of eyepieces, and you can move these left and right, up and down, side by side, hence comparison microscope.
And when you did that in this case, were you able to make a determination as to whether the casing was fired from the firearm that you received?
Yes, sir.
And what was that determination?
I determined that it was fired in the submitted firearm.
And you said that you were also, I guess another part of your examination is testing the safety mechanisms.
Yes, sir.
What does that entail?
It's generally a standard as part of our checklist, depending on what type of safeties are on the weapon. And then we'll go one step further. In this case, one moment, please. In this case, I also conducted what's called a drop test. This is when we cock the hammer. We'll cock the hammer back, as it actually is already cocked back in this, as it is presented, and we'll literally drop it on the ground, on the muzzle. We'll drop it on the butt, and we'll drop it on the side. So we drop it 3 times. We just let it fall on the ground to see if we can get the hammer to fall and trip.
Is there a specific height that you drop the firearm from?
It's an approximate table height, around 30 inches.
And what's the purpose of that drop test?
Just to assure that that it can't or shouldn't fire or won't fire if it's been jarred in some form or fashion, whether it was bumped against something or hit against something or dropped.
Did the firearm, I guess, pass, or how would you explain the result of the drop test?
We would call it a pass or a fail, and it passed, yes.
Okay. And so does passing mean that it did not fire even when dropped?
Yes, sir.
I guess, would that indicate to you that it would not fire if it was bumped or hit?
Yes, sir.
What other safety mechanisms did you examine the firearm for?
This weapon, I believe, has several. One is called a disconnector. What this does is it resets the trigger when you fire the weapon, and a bullet goes out the barrel, cartridge case is extracted, ejected, and another one is loaded. You did that by pulling the trigger all the way to the rear. If it were a full automatic firearm, it would just continue to fire until you let go of the trigger. But this is a semi-automatic, and the safety that allows it to do that is called a disconnect. So once you fire it, you have to let go of the trigger, or at least release the pressure till it resets, and then you have to pull it again to fire again. Another safety that this weapon has is called a firing pin block. Basically what this does, most likely usually a plunger of some type inside the weapon, that unless it's blocking the firing pin, and when you pull the trigger, a bar will move that out of the way and clear the channel for the firing pin to go forward. That requires a pull of the trigger in order for it to fire. I believe it also had a decocking lever. This is a manual safety mechanisms. So when the if the hammer is cocked back, as it is in this situation, if you push down on the decocking lever, it'll drop the hammer, but in a way in which it won't fire.
And was there any other safety mechanisms?
I believe there was a safety intercept type. Yes, intercept. What this does, there's a small notch in the hammer, and when you pull the trigger, if you're pulled all to the rear, it'll clear and the hammer goes all the way to strike the firing pin. But if for some reason you started to pull the trigger and it released, but you let go of the trigger, it would catch it and stop it before it hits the firing pin. That is something you see on a lot of hammer fired firearms.
And so with that last safety mechanism, if it caught it before it hit the firing pin, would the firearm not fire?
It should not fire, no.
Can you tell the jury what is trigger pull?
Trigger pull is basically the amount of pressure, usually measured in pounds, it takes to actually pull the trigger to the rear. The force you needed to do that.
Is there a way to, I guess, explain it in a little more layman's term?
Yes, I've heard different analogies. If you can think about, a matter of fact, someone mentioned the other day about there's a certain amount of pound of pressure it takes to open a Coke can. Think of it in that term, in those terms, how much force it takes.
Did you determine the trigger pull of this firearm?
Yes, sir, we did.
And what was that?
There are two ways this weapon fires, both single action and double action. Both of those will have different pounds of pressure.
And let me interrupt. Can you tell the jury what's the difference between single action and double action?
Yes, sir. So this is what's called a double action firearm. It can fire two different ways. When we talk about action, we're talking about what the trigger does. So in this situation, you can see that the hammer is cocked back. Okay. So when you pull the trigger is going to do one thing. It's going to release the hammer, and the hammer's going to fall and hit the firing pin. That's single action. Trigger did one thing. In double action mode, which this pistol can fire this way, if the hammer were down and you had a cartridge in it, you could pull the trigger and it will actually cock the hammer back, and at a certain point it'll do its second thing, which will release it, letting it fire. So it's doing two things. So that's double action. Normally these have different pounds of pressure. One is usually lighter or heavier. So in single action mode, this registered between 5 and 5 1/4 pounds. And in double action mode, it was 9.5 to 10 pounds. So obviously for double action, it's much heavier or takes more force to pull the trigger all the way to the rear.
In either action, single or double action, would firing the firearm require someone to fully depress the trigger?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell the jury what's, I guess, considered a hairpin trigger?
Generally what we call hair triggers, that's when the pounds of pressure it takes to pull the trigger and to release the sear engagement is very light, generally way under 2 pounds. In my experience, I've only come across maybe 2 or 3 maybe 5 that were, I would consider a hair trigger.
And so this 5 to 9 range, I guess, what would you consider that? Is that within the standard range, or?
It's typical of what I would see in a weapon such as this.
Based on your training and experience, as well as your examination of the firearm, did you make a determination as to whether or not this particular firearm is likely to fire without someone pulling the trigger?
Based on my examination, I would not expect this weapon to fire without someone pulling the trigger all the way to the rear.
We'll pass the witness, Judge.
Defense?
Yes. Mr. Pendleton, as far as trigger pull is concerned, you indicated that this firearm that you examined was either single action or double action. Those are the two methods that you observed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if at the time that this firearm discharged, if it was in a single action mode or double action mode?
Both. We measure it on excuse me, you're asking how I tested it?
No. So my question is, do you, based on what you did to evaluate this firearm, do you know, or can you tell the jury if at the time this firearm was discharged on September 21st, 2020, if it was in the single action mode or double action mode?
No, I would not know that.
And would you agree with me that if there is an outside force, let's just say, for instance, we have an individual whose finger is on the trigger, right? And you have other pressure from other parties, could be maybe someone else's hand. Is that other person's, depending on how much force is applied, that could also cause the firearm and the trigger to pull and discharge?
Yes, sir, I would agree with that.
And specifically, what were the three specific tests that you were asked to run or to determine in this case?
I was asked to determine whether the weapon was functional. I was asked to determine whether the ammunition and cartridge cases were suitable. I was also asked to check the safeties, and I was asked to check to see if the fired cartridge case was fired in the weapon.
And that was it?
Yes, sir.
And no further questions, Your Honor. Pass the witness.
State?
No further questions.
All right, is this witness excused or subject to recall?
Excuse.
Excuse, Your Honor.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state and attorneys for the defense. Do you understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you.
Good, thank you,
Let
Your
me
Honor.
step down. All right, do y'all need a slight break? Yes. Yes. All right, and state the next witness that you're calling, would that be your last witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so the next witness is going to be called, the state is telling me it's their last witness. So I'm going to give you all a short break because there's something I need to take up outside your presence, okay? So what I'm going to do is we're going to be back at 4, okay? Remember, don't deliberate, don't discuss anything with anyone. I'll let you know when it's time to deliberate, okay? Everyone, please rise for the jurors.
It may be with a Z. I'll ask her.
Oh, you have that. That's on.
Yeah.
Okay.
In her interview, she said Z.
So we'll judge will have her.
Can you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you can lower your hand, and defense is probably going to ask you to lower your mask.
Okay.
All right, so state your name for the record, please.
Sabrina Espinoza.
All right, so Miss Espinoza, my understanding is that an attorney has been appointed to represent you. Attorney, could you state your name for the record, please?
Will Brooks, Your Honor.
All right, and Mr. Brooks, have you had a chance to confer with your client?
Yes, Your Honor, I have.
And have you had a chance to confer with the state and the defense on this matter?
I've conferred with the state, Judge.
All right, and are you aware of the legal issues that may occur with your client?
Yes, Your Honor.
And do you feel you've had significant time to confer with your client and you're ready to proceed?
Yes, Judge, we are.
All right, thank you. You can bring them in.
All right, to the jury.
Oh, please be seated. We're standing for you all. Oh, and just so you know, you can sit in any seat that you want to sit in. They're all hard and uncomfortable.
I'm going for the non-squeaky one.
Okay. People just aren't used, what is it, WD-40 anymore. All right. State, call your next witness.
They call Sabrina Espinoza.
All right, Ms. Espinoza has been previously sworn in, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Ms. Espinoza's attorney is Mr. Brooks, and that is why he's sitting there, because he's her attorney. All right, you've been sworn in. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Sabrina Espinoza.
All right, state.
Thank you, Judge. And Sabrina, can you spell your last name?
Espinoza.
Sabrina, how old are you?
23.
Are you from San Antonio?
Yes.
Are you currently working anywhere?
I was working in construction. I do stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a job right now?
Not at this moment.
And you have an attorney here. Do you have a criminal case pending here in Bexar County?
No.
Are you currently on deferred probation for a criminal case?
Yes.
Is that for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Espinoza, I'm going to need you to make sure you speak up so that everyone can hear you.
Okay. This one? Oh, okay.
And were you offered any sort of benefit for testifying today?
No.
Have you ever been convicted of any misdemeanor offenses?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I.
Do you have a conviction for burglary of a vehicle?
No.
I guess, have you ever broken into a vehicle?
No.
You've never broken into a vehicle? And let me clarify. So breaking into a vehicle means entering a vehicle that you didn't have consent to be in.
Yeah, but it's not basically breaking in, but yes, I've done it.
And so by that, you mean you didn't actually break anything to enter?
No, I don't break nothing. No.
But you have entered vehicles that you didn't have permission?
Yes.
Sabrina, did you know someone by the name of Michael Sophia?
Yes.
How did you know him?
We dated. He was older than me, but yeah, we dated for 2 years.
Have you had an issue with drug use in the past?
Yes.
Would you say that you still have an issue with drug use?
Yes.
Did Michael have an issue with drug use?
Yes.
Do you remember the last time that you saw Michael alive?
Yes, I remember.
Do you remember where that was at?
Yes.
Where was it?
At Valero. Military.
Valero at military, on military? How did you get to that Valero?
In a vehicle.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Would September of 2020 sound about right as far as the last time you saw Michael?
Yeah, September 24th.
Does this Bolero look familiar to you?
Yes.
What about this vehicle?
Yes.
How do you recognize that vehicle?
Because I stole it.
Where did you steal it from?
I stole it the street right before Timber Creek. Because it was unlocked and it had the keys in it and I had nowhere to go, so I took off in it.
Okay. Why were you on Timber Creek? Were you, I guess, were you walking?
I got stranded over there
Okay.
and it was dark and I was really high on drugs, so I decided to take the vehicle.
And so you said I guess, did you know it was unlocked?
Yeah. I pretty much knew because when I was walking down that street, the car was like literally parked like almost out of the driveway. So I was like, of course, being high on drugs and stuff, you just don't care. So I decided to just take off in it.
Do you remember about how long before Michael's death that you took that vehicle?
A week.
Would you and Michael drive around in the vehicle?
Yes.
The house that you took the vehicle from, did you know the people that live inside?
No.
Had you ever been inside the house before?
No.
Had you ever been inside the house after you took the vehicle?
No.
And so who drove that vehicle to the Bolero on that day?
I didn't. I drove it that day.
Was Michael in the car with you?
Yeah, he was in the passenger seat.
Why did y'all go to that Bolero?
He wanted cigarettes.
And so while you were at the Bolero, did something happen?
Yes.
What was the first thing that caught your attention out of the ordinary about that day?
This big brown Tundra with black edging around the rims came and put up in front of us, and it was a dude, and I know exactly what he was wearing too. And he was on the phone talking to someone, and he kept on looking at Mikey. I call him Mikey. Yeah, so he kept on looking at him, and
Did you let Mikey know that the guy was looking at him?
yes.
Was the guy in his vehicle?
Yes, he was in his vehicle.
At some point, did he get out of his vehicle?
Yes.
What did he do when he got out of the vehicle?
He walked out of the vehicle with the gun in his hand, straight to the car's passenger side, and knocked on Mikey's window
Did he knock on the window with, if you remember, his hand or the gun?
with the gun.
Do you remember if he said anything when he did that?
No, he was still on the phone too. So he knocked on the window with the gun and he had the phone in his hand. He was still on the phone talking to someone.
Did you or Mikey roll down the window?
No.
What did you do next?
Well, I was gonna get out the car, just tell Mikey to take off. But Mikey said just to, take off. So I tried taking off.
Do you know what the guy wanted?
I'm pretty sure. At first I didn't know,
Well,
but
so at that time, did you know what the guy wanted?
no,
Did you recognize the guy at all?
no.
And so, I guess, what did you do when the guy knocked on the window with the gun?
Well, I got scared. I'm not gonna lie, because me and Mikey, we didn't have no protection, So, and plus we were already running from all, previous stuff. And I didn't want Mikey to get in trouble, So I was gonna just tell Mikey just to dip off and just, but he told me to take off, and that's when I crashed into the gas pump.
Okay, so you drove the vehicle?
Yes, I drove it.
Did you drive in reverse or forward?
I tried reversing it.
That'll be overruled.
You can answer.
I tried reversing it,
And what
but
happened?
I put off way too fast. And the steering wheel was all the way to the right, so I crashed right into the gas pump.
Did you turn the steering wheel as you were reversing?
It was already turned all the way. I didn't think to turn it, so yeah. So it just went right into the gas pump.
Were you able to drive the vehicle once you crashed into that pump area?
No, it was out.
What did the guy do with the gun?
Well, Mikey just told me to run, and I was like, okay, you know. So he gets out of the car, and that guy grabs onto Mikey and pulls him by his shirt back. So I start screaming at him and stuff, telling him to let him go. And the guy doesn't want to let him go, you know, and I'm telling him that, you know, I'm the one that had the car, like I'm the one driving the car just to let him go. And they didn't want to let him go.
So did the guy ever approach you, even though you were the one driving the car?
It was like if I didn't even exist, like they just wanted Mikey. That's how I felt, because they didn't even glance my way, you know, like all eyes were on Mikey. And
You said at one point you ran off.
yeah, I ran off when he got shot.
So before, when Mikey was telling you to run, you didn't run?
He told me take off running. We took off running, of course, you know. And as soon as I saw him pull Mikey back, I went back, you know.
What was Michael trying to do?
He was trying to get away. Like he already had too many stuff, you know, like, and it was my fault for that, you know, like I didn't want him to get in trouble, you know. So it kind of like just like I don't understand why they didn't want to let him go, you know.
So Michael, I guess, was Michael walking towards the guy or away from the guy?
He was trying to pull away from him, but that dude was, you know, bigger than Mikey, so, and pretty strong.
Was the
So
guy still holding a gun?
yes, he had the gun pointed directly at Mikey.
Do you remember
Like,
where he was holding the gun at?
yes, he had him by his shirt on this side, and he had the gun right here directly below his neck for a good hot minute. He was doing that.
And while he was holding the gun to Michael's neck, what was Michael doing?
He was Mikey's the type that he's still gonna want to get away, but he started calming down, and he was just there. Like he had just told me to run, and I had told him that I wasn't gonna take off.
Did you ever see Michael swing or punch the guy?
No.
Did you ever try to get in between Michael and the guy?
Yes, because he had the gun pointed like directly skin on gun contact, you know, and me being all crazy and stuff, you know, especially for Mikey, I'm gonna do what I gotta do to take that, you know.
So what did you do?
I tried moving that gun away from Mikey.
So you got in between them?
Yes.
Were you able to take the gun away from, I guess, contact?
No.
Michael? No? And so how was the guy holding on to Michael?
At first he had him by his shirt, and then he had him by a headlock. Yeah, so basically around his neck area, grabbing onto his shirt, pulling him back, you know, just stuff like that.
And so at some point are you no longer in between Michael and the guy?
Yeah, at some point I'm no longer between, and I'm just freaking screaming frantically and stuff because, you know, and then he shot him.
Did you see him shoot Michael?
Yeah, I saw him shoot him, and he shot him towards his neck area, and that's when Mikey started choking on his own blood. And
How close to you were? How close were you?
I was
to-
like 5 feet away.
So you weren't in between them anymore.
No, I wasn't in between them no more.
How did you get so far away?
I started to take off. Well, that's not even really far away. I was like literally right by the sidewalk right here, and he's over here, you know. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna stay here, you know, like we're just gonna get in trouble, you know.
So I guess, did Michael ever try to fight the guy?
No.
Sabrina, have you ever seen surveillance video from that day?
No, but I don't really need to because I remember everything that happened.
I want to show you, I just want you to identify yourself in the video. I'm gonna show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 1. If you recall, is this that same video we see in the frame at 5:16? If you can tell it, if not, you can say I can't. Oh, sorry, in the photo. Oh, sorry, is this the vehicle that you were in that day? Let me keep playing some more. Can you tell who that person is?
No, not yet.
Is it any clear now or still no?
No, I
I'll let
mean,
it play through it.
just dark shadows.
As the videos playing, I guess, do the events that we see, do those seem familiar to you? You can answer yes or no, Sabrina.
Excuse me, sorry.
What we're watching now, does this seem familiar? Does what happened on the day?
Yes.
And so we saw this individual, we see the two people walking away. Would that have been when you and Michael were trying to get away?
Objection on her leading.
Sustained.
this person right here. Do you remember what you were wearing that day?
Yes,
Does that appear to be you?
yeah. I always wear a hat with a mask, cover myself up.
Can you tell what this person appears to be doing?
Trying to get away.
Objection on cause for speculation.
Sustained.
He's trying to get away.
Sustained. That means that you can't answer.
And I want to go back a few frames.
That's me.
And then we see this person we're knowing. Did you know this person at the time?
No, but I remember him. He's an older man.
Did you or Michael, I guess, ever make any attempts to swing or assault him?
No.
Your Honor, we'll pass the witness.
Defense,
Yes, Judge, thank you. I'm under permission to approach the witness.
granted.
Ms. Espinoza, I'm handing you what's been marked as defendant's exhibit number 2, 3, and 4. Can you take a look at these documents? And after you're done reviewing them, without telling me or reading anything from it, I wish please let me know. Now, Mrs. Espinoza, the documents that I handed you, specifically the defendant's exhibit number 2, that is, do you recognize that document?
Of course.
What is that document?
Your Honor, I'm gonna object. I believe defense is attempting to get it. Actually, can I examine Stacy's part defense exhibit 2, Your Honor? I believe he's trying to get
Yes.
something inadmissible.
Your Honor, and I would ask for, I was wrong.
I'm sorry, Judge.
Okay.
Okay.
As the sidebar, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. Nancy states, I mean, Right, defense.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Espinoza, do those documents labeled as defendants exhibit number 2 and number 3, were those the documents that you signed placing you on deferred adjudication?
Yes.
And specifically in those documents, were you provided conditions that you were supposed to follow while on supervision?
Wait, repeat that again?
Were you provided conditions that you were supposed to follow?
Of course.
And one of those conditions was not to have any contact with Michael Cepeda. Would you agree?
Yeah. And I was still around him because I loved him.
And did the state file what's called a motion to revoke your probation
Mhm.
for being in contact with Michael Cepeda?
Yes.
And has your probation been revoked?
Actually, no, that's my probation was revoked because as soon as I got out, I didn't go report before. So that's the reason why. Not because I was around Mikey, it was because I didn't go report.
And so you got continued on probation though, would you agree?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Espinoza,
Mhm.
earlier you were asked if you had ever been convicted of a misdemeanor. Do you recall that?
Mhm.
Now, do you recall on July 10th of 2020 that you were convicted of 2 offenses of burglary of a habitation?
Objection, Your Honor.
Excuse me, of a vehicle, or burglary of a vehicle, and you served 72 days in county for that.
Yes, but also those charges got dropped. They ended up getting dropped because I was basically just joyriding. So yeah, it's pretty horrible.
So when you say dropped, in your mind, does dropped mean that?
Or
they-
maybe I did do the time for them, but I don't know. But it could be right. I don't know.
And Ms. Cepeda, are you under the influence at the time of any, right now, are you under the influence? Of any
No.
drugs?
No.
But you were in the past, you were, again, you indicated and you testified that you have used drugs in the past.
Yes.
You presently have a drug use issue.
Yes, I have a drug addiction problem.
And now on the day of September 20th, well, let me back up. Your testimony is that on about a week before this incident takes place,
Mhm.
you went by the address where that vehicle that in that video is you went by that address at some point. Right?
Yes.
And at some point you got in the vehicle,
And took off. Yes.
and at some point, let me ask you, were you charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle because of that offense?
I believe so, yes. Because when I got detained again, I had unauthorized use. So I'm believing it has to be that one because I haven't gotten caught.
And they haven't prosecuted you for that offense. Is that fair to say?
They dropped that charge and they kept the aggravated assault. So yeah. So basically whenever that happened, everything was already cleared out. So I'm just charged with the aggravated assault and I'm on deferred probation for that.
Now, Ms. Espinoza, as far as your involvement in this case, at any point, did you make a statement to a Detective Ferguson on January 26th of 2021?
I don't remember on the cool, but I
Yeah.
probably did. Or didn't. I don't know.
And have you had an opportunity to review the statement that you provided to Detective Ferguson?
No.
So do you recall providing the statement or you do not recall providing the statement to Detective Ferguson?
Let's see, during that time I was pretty messed up. So I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember. So
Miss Espinoza, as far as your recollection of the events of that afternoon, you would agree that your recollection is pretty fuzzy.
Yeah. Like, what do you mean by that? Like,
But what I mean by that, Miss Espinoza, is that the details that you remember about what happened that evening aren't that clear to you right now. Would you agree with me?
I mean, the details about that is clear, you know? I don't know how you're not gonna just forget about that, you know? But I remember that clearly.
On September 21st, 2020, you and Mr. Cepeda arrive at that. Well, let me ask you this. You were driving down the address where you acquired that particular vehicle. Would you agree?
Not exactly. I was by that area, but I didn't drive right past it. That's, you know, but I was by the area.
So at some point after driving by that area,
Mhm.
you get here to the Valero, right?
Yes.
When you get to the Valero, you and Mikey are having an argument. Would you agree?
It wasn't, oh, it was a little back talking, you know, but we were actually getting along pretty well that day. So he was just being a little turd. He's being a turd.
Do you recall that on January 26th of 2021, you advised Detective Ferguson that Mikey had an I don't give a fuck attitude?
Yeah, he did.
In fact, you specifically told Detective Ferguson on the same day.
Just 1 second. Excuse me. If you have a question to ask the witness, you can ask the witness the question. And if you need to show her statement, you can show her statement.
Yes, Judge. On January 26th, 2021,
Mhm.
do you recall telling Detective Ferguson?
Objection, hearsay.
It's not actually on it. It's her specific statement.
It is actually hearsay. Can I have parties approach?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the state's last witness. We need to take a short break for some information to be reviewed. Is everyone okay with staying a little later to finish up with this witness? All right. All right. Remember my instructions. Don't talk to each other. Don't deliberate. Don't look up anything. I'll let you know when it's okay for you to start deliberating. Everyone, please rise for the jurors.
All right, you all will show her The video, please.
So, so we're ready.
Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, to the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, and we have a different interpreter. Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear and affirm you will faithfully translate from English into Spanish and Spanish into English, so help you God?
I do, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. And you could state your name for the record.
Norma Nero.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, defense.
Oh, yes, Your Honor. Ms. Espinoza, in front of you, you have a document labeled as Defendant's Exhibit number 4. Did you take a look at that one? Okay.
Yes.
Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
And is that fairly and accurately depict the item that was being used on September 21st, 2020?
Yes, and other items too. But
What do you mean by other items?
probably alcohol and bud. That's it.
And what is the item there in exhibit number 4?
A meth bowl, a methamphetamines bowl.
And that methamphetamine ball is the one that you and Mikey were using that day in front of the Valero. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Now, Your Honor, at this time, I'd move to admit defendant's exhibit number 4.
All right, any objection?
If I can say it real quick, Judge. Or I would just object to relevance.
All right, could I see exhibit number 4? Thank you. All right, defense exhibit number 4 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Espinoza, on the day that you were in front of the Valero, you would agree that Mikey was not in the right state of mind.
Yeah, we both weren't.
And in fact, at that time, when Mr. Parada approaches the vehicle, he's looking at the vehicle, and you and Mr. Cepeda were in the vehicle together,
Mhm.
right? And you tell Mikey that Mr. Parada is just looking at me, right?
Looking at him.
Looking at him.
Yes.
And in fact, at that moment, Mikey didn't care. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, he was high, and he was trying to rummage through the glove compartment looking for a lighter. And yeah.
And it was at this time when Mikey, Mr. Cepeda, actually started breaking the glove compartment.
No, he was jamming the key in there, and he was doing it too rough. So like he just had to calm down a little, and he would have opened it. But eventually he did, and he opened it.
He was pretty excited. Would you describe him as very excited at that moment?
No, I mean, he was just high and just trying to open a glove compartment.
Okay. And so at some point, you make contact with Mr. Parada. Mr. Parada here, correct?
I'm guessing so, yeah. And try moving his arm away from Mikey because he was pointing a gun at him.
Isn't it true that at some point you indicated that you stayed there with Mikey and you were grabbing his hands to try to take the gun away from him?
No, I was moving the gun away from Mikey. Okay, so like let's just say he had the gun pointed right to his neck. I moved the gun that way, which is his hand, and the gun that way. And I'm not gonna do something and then make it worse. Like if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it right. And that's exactly what I did. And, you know, a man is stronger. So of course it was like, not even moving, nothing, you know, but I was trying. So
Okay, and so at some point, Mikey, you in the middle, and the individual who had the firearm, were all pretty close to each other. Would you agree?
yes.
And after looking at the video that was showed to you by the state,
Mhm.
you can see that the individual in that video is holding the firearm back here. Would you agree after seeing that video?
No, he's not holding the firearm back there. He had that gun pointed towards Mikey.
Okay. So-
He probably had, that was probably his phone or something, but no, he had the gun pointed at Mikey. And I'm not gonna just be ruffling this dude if he didn't have the gun pointed to him, you know? So, I mean, in the video, it shows me literally like trying to restrain the gun away from him.
You actually grabbed the gun.
No, I did not grab the gun. I grabbed his arm to move the gun away.
And Miss Espinoza,
Mhm.
did you at any point after Mr. Cepeda is injured, at any point, what did you do after Mr. Cepeda was injured?
I took off. I took off running, booking it, like rowdy booking it, because the fact that
Sustained.
Miss Espinoza, so you ran, you took off. Did you call the police and let them know what had happened?
well, I mean, it's obvious that the police were gonna get called, you know, and it's obvious that I wasn't even supposed to be around Mikey, you know, and I'm not gonna just deal with the death and be right in jail, you know. So I dealt with that another way, you know.
Now, earlier you testified for the state, and they asked you, that Michael was trying to get away because he already had too many stuff. What did you mean by stuff?
Back to
Yeah, I'm not.
violating the motion of the judge.
Your Honor, they've opened the door and she specifically said that on direct.
All right, I'm going to sustain the state's objection. If you want to ask her specific questions, you're more than welcome to.
When you say stuff, you're referring to other cases. Is that fair to say?
Well, just yeah.
Now, you also testified that he was the type. What did you mean by that? That he was the type?
Like, what do you think I mean? I don't know. You mean a lot of things.
So when you testified that he was the type, you said, but then he started calming down. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean,
I'm gonna object to relevance.
Gotta be overruled.
You can answer, Ms. Espinosa.
I mean, it's obvious, like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it because, you know, but he just calmed down. I don't know what else to say.
And the case that you're on deferred for, that's a second degree felony,
Yes.
and you could potentially go to prison for up to 2 years, up to 20 years. Is
Mhm.
that safe to say?
Yes.
And is it safe to say that the only time that you speak with the police department or law enforcement was the day that you get arrested for a new offense?
Yeah, because come on.
No further questions for this witness, Judge.
State?
Very briefly, Judge. Sabrina, earlier you said that when you got picked up, you had a charge for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle.
Mhm.
And you assumed that it was for this date.
Mhm.
Did you ever get I guess, did you pick up any? Was there a drug offense for that day that you picked up?
No.
We'll pass along the judge.
Defense?
No further questions, Judge.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Excuse for the statement.
Judge, we asked to keep her subject to recall.
All right. The rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. You can only speak to attorneys for the state and attorneys for the defense, and you need to make sure that you're available for recall if someone decides to recall you as a witness. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you may step down. They call your next witness.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Part of the statements.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start tomorrow at exactly 10:30. I've moved some things around, so we'll be able to start at that time. At that time, the defense is going to put on their case if they decide to call witnesses. And we are going to finish with all of the testimony tomorrow, okay? So you've heard some evidence in this case. You're not allowed to discuss it amongst yourself or begin deliberating or even start thinking about it in your head. I will let you know when you're allowed to deliberate. I don't expect this to have any media presence, but if you were to see something, just turn it off. Don't pay any attention to it. And if somebody tries to speak to you about this, do not listen. Do not do any investigation in this case. Everything that you need to make a decision in this case will be from inside the courtroom. Does everyone understand? All right. Thank you all so much for your patience. Everyone, please rise for the jurors.